Good evening. Welcome to Crossroads Career Network webinar tonight. As always, we appreciate you joining us. My name is Tom Jacobson, and many of you have probably seen some of our previous webinars and heard these same introductions each time. However, we're grateful each time we have new people joining us and participating. So everyone, we want to make sure everyone knows what we give through Crossroads freely and what's available. So bear with me as we go through this presentation. So if you've heard the topics before, or this introduction before, just know that we'll be getting to the topic very soon. So on a volunteer basis, I lead the Crossroads out of Woodbury Lutheran Church in Woodbury. However, during this pandemic, we are having the 3 Twin City sites online, doing the seminars online as opposed to being in person. I'm looking forward to our presentation topic tonight, and it'll be very informative, I'm sure, and you'll get a lot of encouragement for your pursuit of your next career. So, but first, I would like to do an overview of Crossroads. I'm going to share my screen here with you. Bear with me as I do that. There we go. Come on. Share. Okay. There we go. Okay, so welcome to Crossroads. Our agenda for tonight, from 7 to 7:15, I'll be doing this introduction and overview of Crossroads. Coming up at 7:15, Mike Enberg will be doing My Career Crossroads. He will share his story with you. And then at 7:25, Dave Sparkman will be on to do compensation strategies. And then by 8:25, we will be wrapping up and have you out of here by 8:30. So that's our agenda for tonight. There are three Twin Cities Crossroads groups. The one in Eden Prairie at Grace Church, the one here in Woodbury out of Woodbury Lutheran Church, and then our site in Arden Hills, North Heights Lutheran Church, which are the 3 sites that we, when we do in-person meetings and webinars and the 8-week courses, those are where the sites are. So one of the fantastic parts about Crossroads is our great webinar, our great website. Our website has many tools on it. There's job boards, there's other tools, and it's designed for easy navigation. So check it out. It's mncrossroads.com. Give it a look. See, you can see what the upcoming webinars are. You can check out some of our online tools for job search. There's many different things that are available to you. So give it a try. It is very useful, and you'll find a lot of great information out there. One of the other things that we have available for you every week is Networking with Grace. And Grace is an online group meeting which they do networking, and you can sign up in advance on our website and join that. And it's led by Wes Tang and Wes. Oh, I lost Wes's last name. Anyways, Roper, and the 2 of them are great at networking and will really help you in your job networking and your pursuit of your next career. So give that a try. We also have one-on-one coaching available online. That is a great opportunity for you to sign up and get some help with different aspects of job search, like maybe even interviewing, your resume, other things of that nature. So give that a try, and you might find some great opportunities to improve your overall game and your interviewing or whatever you're looking to improve. We also have an opportunity for you to get support through prayer. And all you have to do is submit your requests online, and someone will get back in touch with you and help you through the ins and outs of praying for you in that way. So it's a great opportunity to get a little help when you need it most. Um, we have online classes available, and our 8-week course is really the meat and potatoes of Crossroads. It really is where we can deliver the most bang for the buck. And those 8-week courses are very structured. They start out with, focus on your attitude. How do I get a better attitude? What are the attitude components? What are the things that I need to focus on? These are great classes. There's assessments online and different tools that you can take a part of, and really focus on the things that you need to work on to get a great opportunity and do a great job in your interviewing or search or resume, all the types of things that are necessary for building your portfolio. Networking, how to do successful network, when to do it, who are the people you want to meet, targeting companies, great opportunities for building resumes and learning how to do it, interviewing, negotiating, and selecting a company. All these things are covered in the 8-week course. And right now we have 2 courses that are starting in January. We have one on the 19th that'll be led by Catherine Rose, and one on the 20th of January who will be led by Steve Woodley. So they're on the website, check them out, sign up. It's a great opportunity to really improve your game and really get the things started. So I would really highly recommend that you go forth and get that, check out our small group classes. We also have a LinkedIn group that's available. So all you have to do is go to the search bar there on LinkedIn, type in MN Crossroads Career Network, and up will pop our LinkedIn group. And you can go ahead and try to put in and join. What you'll find is about 2,000 people who are on the LinkedIn group who have gone through job search and have willing to help you in networking or whatever your needs are. So there's also great articles posted there. There's our other scheduled events that are coming up. So it is a great opportunity to get information about what's going on at Crossroads, but it's also an opportunity to have a link to very important networking connections. So check it out. It's a great tool. And what I'd like to talk about next is Thrivent. Thrivent is one of our big partners. They've been helping us greatly here at Crossroads. They have great tools on their website too for job search. So give them a try, check them out. There's great links on there. There's a link on our website to their site. So check that out, and really, they've really been a great help for us, and they'll be a great help for your job search too. So Crossroads is about the people that are out there helping on a day-to-day basis. Here is a slide with many of the faces of the Crossroads. And this is just a small sample. And many of there's a few of us who are on that slide right now that'll be in today's meeting. So it's kind of interesting, but many people make up Crossroads and make this work for you. So Crossroads, that's just a small sample of the amount of people that are here working each day to help and job search and help with your career search. One of the things that during the pandemic, it's more prevalent, but all our churches are streaming online now. So check out one of our sites if you're looking for a site for church and spiritual opportunities. So here we have www.woodburylutheran.org, North Heights Church, and Grace Church are our websites. So that is Crossroads, our overview. Just wanted to share anything with you that I could there. It's a great opportunity to check things out. Now what I'd like to do is introduce Mike Engberg, who I've known for a long time, and he's going to share his Crossroads career story with you tonight. Mike and I have known each other for a long time, since 2013, as we were sharing just now. So I'll let you take things over from here, Mike.
All right, can you hear me now? Thank you, Tom. It was a pleasant surprise when I connected in that I hadn't seen Tom in quite a bit, quite a few years, and seeing him pop up was a fun surprise seeing him. So yeah, I am quite familiar with Crossroads. I have had quite a bit of experience with them. I go back quite a few years with Crossroads. It's been about 2 years now since I've kind of checked into some of the things that they have going on here. A lot has changed. Technology has changed quite a few things with them. But I'm thankful for the opportunity to share my story. Again, my name is Mike Engberg. Currently, I'm a Scrum Master for 2 teams that are developing a browser application for a government agency. The program that we're developing for is called WIC. You may have heard that. It's Women's, Infant, and Children. And I'm helping to lead a couple of teams in that effort. And we are now about 2 years into it and getting close to bringing that to completion. Crossroads to me is a real gift, and I really appreciate all that they do as in the situations that we're in to get us back on our feet again and back into the workplace. I feel like an alumni for Crossroads a number of times over. Through the years that I attended Crossroads, I would come and go. I would get different jobs, and as that one job ended, I would come back to Crossroads again and kind of refresh things, and then go back out and start looking again for something else. It was I felt like I almost fell in a category of where I'd heard a lot. I'd heard a lot of the same things, but they also came up with some things that were new and fresh, and always something that would help me get back into it. The last seminar that I listened to was by Dale Henry. It was a lot of fun and quite entertaining, as well as educational. You know, you always pick up different things from the different seminars that they had. Being unemployed, not something new to me, unfortunately. I had been through unemployment periods of time 4 different times over the course of my working career. Some were short, some were longer. The first one came actually after the first job that I had. The company I was working for kind of hit a rough spot, and they had to let some people go. And my boss came to me and said, "Yeah, I'm going to have to let you go. And I'm choosing you because I know you'll be able to find a job quicker than what your coworker will." So with that, we parted ways, and he was right. I did find a job within about 2.5 weeks, so that wasn't too bad. 20 years later, with the same company, after being in a management position, I was overseeing a pretty extensive IT network, and we'd done a lot of interesting and good things, but things do change. New leadership came in, and I was on the outside looking in. But the last time I went through it, 2.5 weeks, no big deal. Now I had some good experience. I had a lot of good connections, and I thought, you know, I'll be back working in no time. Well, unfortunately, it didn't quite work out that way. It took a bit longer than that. It was 10 long, frustrating, aggravating months before I found another job. And at the beginning, it wasn't a job I really was too terribly excited about. And during that time period, it was kind of rough. I was angry with God. Things were not going real well. It was hard on our family. And it took much longer than what I thought it was going to take. And it also was a big hit to my faith. And that lasted for a number of years. But that job I was in, it did get better over time, and I was there for 8 years. I was again managing people in the software development industry. We had a small development team, and we developed some pretty neat stuff. I developed some good relationships there. But over time, again, change happened, and new leadership came in, and I was left out in the cold again. But this time was different, I thought. God heard my prayers this time. Then I was back in the saddle again within 6 weeks or so. And this time I had a pretty highly paid job, kind of an influential position, and my title had director in it. So, you know, it was kind of important, I thought. But be careful what you ask for. The job was not a real good fit. And after 9 months, it came to an end. And as that came to an end, a new journey began. It was the beginning of a pretty incredible, yet gut-wrenching journey. It was one of those things where you look back and you're glad you went through it, but at the same time you say, you know, I don't think I'd really want to go through that again. It was 6 years of being either unemployed or underemployed, and a lot of different things happened during that 6-year period of time. I remember during that beginning of that time, I read a blog by the founder of an organization called the Marketplace Leaders. His name was Oz Hillman. The organization, their ministry is to equip individuals to live out their faith at work. And he was talking about going through a 7-year period of time, and he called it a period of darkness. He had lost a job. He essentially lost everything, including his marriage. But it was a time period where it really kind of reshaped who he was and was a catalyst for the ministry that he started. And I remember thinking at the time, I thought, wow, I don't think I could ever do that. 7 years. Well, I almost did go that long. Surprise, surprise. Now, do keep in mind that each of our experiences is different. It's unique. Sometimes they're short, sometimes a little bit longer. But I did learn that I do believe that if you trust in God and in his timing, that his timing will be just right. And for me, it happened to be a little bit longer than what it's going to be probably for a lot of you that are listening to this. At the beginning, I was pretty broken, kind of lost, and really kind of felt pretty much alone. One of the things I found being unemployed was that people really didn't understand what that meant, and they weren't really sure how to react to you. And that included some folks that were fairly close to me, and that was tough. But that is where Crossroads and the Crossroads small groups really came into play and were really a big help. They were kind of a support group for me. They provided, not only training, but they provided an emotional and a spiritual support that was, at that point in time, invaluable. At the beginning, one of the first and probably most important things that I did was I turned to God and I said, I'm all yours. I'm trusting you no matter what happens. I kind of hit the bottom and I didn't know where else to go. And so to me, it made sense to find out what's God all about really, and let's see what he can do. And he used those 6 years to mold me into a pretty much a very different person. He used that time to take away some of the fears that I had. He used that time to build confidence as I stepped out into opportunities that he gave to me. He showed me who he was. He always provided, and he prepared me for things to come. I walked into a number of jobs that I felt pretty inadequate doing, but God was faithful. And when I reached out to him, he provided the guidance for me that I needed. Another thing that I did, I reached out for help. I sought help. There are a lot of resources I found that were available. In fact, it was almost kind of mind-boggling, the number that were out there. I attended a number of transition group meetings. I seen almost at the beginning there, every night I was going to a different transition group. But I landed with the transcription group with Crossroads. They felt like a very good fit. They provided, as I mentioned before, the emotional support. The spiritual support was very important to them. They had a plan, as Tom talked about earlier. They had a plan for equipping us as we were looking for jobs, how to find a job, how to present yourselves, how to do interviews, how to do those things in a quality way that would attract a potential employer. I also attended their small groups. The first small group, I don't think I got a whole lot out of it. I was still kind of a daze. It seemed like kind of a blur. They met way too early in the morning for me. I'm not that particularly much of a early morning person. And it flew by and I don't remember a whole lot about it. The second small group that I was a part of, Harry was leading that one. And that was much more productive. I got a lot out of that group. It got me on track into finding a job, preparing me for a job, and equipping me to go out there and interview and present myself. And it was, I made a lot of friendships out of that. In fact, I still have a good friendship with Harry over the years. And I stuck with the folks in that group for quite a long period of time. We've since kind of lost contact, but we supported each other for, in fact, I think it may have gone to more than a year. This was a very interesting time for me, though, and I learned quite a few things during that time period. I learned that there's a lot of help available. Places like Crossroads that have a great ministry for folks that are looking for jobs. But also the state of Minnesota. They provided training for me. I took a couple of different courses through them. And one of the courses that I took actually led to a couple of jobs in my current job. The first job prepared me for the job that I'm currently in. It led me up to Duluth for 6 months, and actually I thought I might end up there, but God had some different plans. I learned that networking is important. Telling others about your situation, telling others about your story. I was listening to a podcast by a pastor, and he was talking about the story about your neighbor and who is your neighbor. And he said, your neighbor is anybody who you tell your story to. And so over the time, I built a lot of neighbors, met a lot of neighbors because I told my story quite a bit. But that also led to job opportunities. Led to 3 different job opportunities for me, and again, including my current position. I learned that God provides and he prepares, as I mentioned before. But he does it in ways that you might not expect, and he might lead you into situations where you might feel ill-prepared and you need to depend on him. But in doing so, you do learn that he is by your side, that whole time. I did a number of different things. I was a director of a company for a short period of time. I worked for Best Buy for a short period of time. I actually worked for my in-laws and did some redecorating for them. Probably one of the most challenging jobs that I had, though, was being a substitute teacher in an elementary school. That was something I was not prepared for. And it was a real eye-opener for me, and I got a whole new appreciation for what goes into teaching. But out of that, I did learn something. I learned to think on my feet a lot better. I learned to be able to run a larger group of individuals, even though they were grade school kids. That is quite a challenge doing that. And I did find that as I was leading some group sessions with my current company, that adults, they can be more challenging than kids are. And there was a couple situations where I almost had to treat them like kids. It was kind of a weird situation there. I also learned how to help others. I would go into networking situations kind of with the mindset of, what can I do to help you versus more of, what can I gain from you to get into some other, open up some other doors or something like that. It was more of an attitude of helping rather than trying to seek help. I would also go into meetings, different meetings, a lot of different types of meetings. And a prayer that I would say before I went in there is there someone there that I should talk to? And it was interesting, the different people that I had conversations with coming out of that. But probably most important is that I learned how to pray. I learned how to pray again. I learned how to listen to God. I learned how to wait on his timing and to seek him in all aspects of my search. You know, there are some benefits I found of being in a time of transition. And one of those is that you do have a little bit of extra time. And I found that during that time, I could spend more time with God, and I could spend more time in prayer and more time reading the Bible and seeking him out. And there were a few times I felt a bit guilty about that, in that, you know, I should be out knocking on doors or whatever, but I chose to spend that time with him, and that was very rewarding. Prayer was my anchor. That's really what kept me going, was that. I spent a lot of time, much more time in prayer than I ever had before, and I continue to do that. I saw how God answers prayers, and I saw how he hears our prayers. Interestingly, he answers some of the prayers that we kind of don't think too much about. We kind of, you know, pray it and don't think about it afterwards. And I remember one time very distinctly where I had said a prayer. I'd been in, you know, transition for probably a couple of years now, and I said, you know, it'd really be nice to have a break, you know, be able to go somewhere. And I prayed that prayer almost off the cuff, and lo and behold, he did answer it. My wife and I had an 18-day road trip. We put on almost 6,000 miles, saw 12 national parks. But I think maybe the best part about that was I had more peace about being on the road than I think I've ever had. And that was definitely a gift from God. The desire to help others and the passion for prayer led me to volunteering with Crossroads and with their prayer ministry team. It's been a real blessing to do that. It's been very rewarding, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to do that. As I mentioned, God used this time to change me and to open up my eyes to new things and to who he is. There's a lot more that happened that I could talk about, but time is limited, time is short, and we do need to get moving on. I think I'm actually cutting into Dave's time now. So I want to bring this to a close, but in closing, I want to leave you with a quote from Oz Hillman. I just happened to read this actually the other day as I was trying to remember what the name of this organization was and who he was. But he says, when we go through a trial of adversity, we need to understand that God is performing radical surgery on our life. The purpose of the surgery is not to destroy us, but to give us a new heart. And God is making a fundamental change in who we are and who we will be. And I found that to very much be the case. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to share. And I hope all the best for you as you go on your job search and as you're in this time of transition.
Thanks, Mike. I sure can appreciate your perspective. Some of the time that you were in transition, I was with you, and I appreciate having you as a confidant and a friend. And I think anyone does who networks with you or is associates with you. So thank you. Now I am really glad to be able to introduce Dave Sparkman. Dave Sparkman has an exceptional background to talk on the topic of compensation tonight. He was a partner with Arthur Anderson leading the HR for the West region. He was a SVP of HR for United Health Group and led the culture organization there. Dave also launched the Crossroads Career Network here in Minnesota and currently chairs the board of directors for the National Crossroads Career Organization. It is my distinct pleasure to be able to introduce you to Dave Sparkman. Dave, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. Really appreciate that. Appreciated the testimony we heard from Mike. Brings me back through a lot of different transitions that I've had the opportunity to serve with people on over the years. And tonight we're going to talk about, as soon as I can find my screen here with the presentation, we're going to talk about compensation, a topic that we generally find near and dear to everyone's heart. Let's see here, how can I get this going? Normal, one slideshow. Let's try that. All right. So hopefully you can see me there. Harry, is that showing up?
We don't have your slides up.
Don't have my
Dave.
slide.
Probably the share screen button at the bottom of your Zoom app.
That would be the first good step to start. Thank you, Harry. All right.
Got it.
So you can see a big thing that I didn't want to show you guys. Okay, now, are we set? Harry, does this look better?
You're up.
All right, thank you. So before we get started, I'd like to open us in a word of prayer and share a brief scripture, and then we're going to jump into the topic that you see on the screen. Lord Jesus, we're so thankful that we can be together tonight. I pray that as you allow me to share some thoughts around compensation, that you give the listeners open ears and open hearts with what is presented. I pray that you would give me the right words to say. And I thank you so much for this organization that we have the opportunity to serve with, to promote your name above all names, in whose name we pray, Christ. Amen. When I think about compensation, as I have found throughout my life, the Bible has a lot to say about every topic, including compensation. I want to share with you a verse, Proverbs 14:23. All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. So if you're like many people, what exactly is the hard work and what is the profit? And how much profit should there be? And as you're going through a transition, depending on where you are in your job transition, inevitably there will be an offer. There will be an acceptance in order for you to start your job. However, compensation is not the last thing at the end of the transition. What I'm hopeful that you'll take away from today is that your compensation strategy needs to be very active right now with wherever you are. You may have just gotten laid off last week. You may be in search for the last 6 months. But if you aren't actively creating and refining your compensation strategy along the way, I am trying to suggest that you're leaving money on the table, that the profit will not be as much for you as it could be if you were constantly going through this throughout the whole process. So to illustrate that, we're going to start with a little quiz. And I know that you all are muted and we won't have an opportunity to go through it. So I'm going to rhetorically ask you some questions and provide the answers that normally I get when we're in person. So this will be a real fun exercise if you listening to me do an exercise. But in a moment, I'm going to show you a collage of picture of a variety of different things. And I'd like you to glean as much from this and see as many of these pictures as you possibly can in about 2 seconds. Ready? All right, that was it. It was there and it was gone. Normally, I would then say, what is it that you saw? And people may say, oh, I saw a chimpanzee. And I would ask, how many people saw the chimpanzee? Generally, a fair number of people actually see the chimpanzee. We're not going to go into psychologically what that means to you if you saw the chimpanzee, but other people may say, oh, I saw a dollar bill. Okay, how many people saw a dollar bill? Other people may say, oh, I saw a couple getting married. Okay, great. Inevitably, I think it's easy for everyone to understand that not everyone saw every picture within that collage of images. Fair to say? Almost impossible, because there's a lot of images in that collage. But now I'm going to show you that exact same collage. This time, I want you to look for something red. Look for something red in this collage. All right. Now, if I asked you, what was it that you saw? Someone would say, I saw a strawberry. How many people saw the strawberry? A lot of hands would go up. Another person might say, oh, I saw the rose. How many people saw the rose? A lot of hands would go up. The question, two questions. Did you see something different the second time than the first time? 100% of the time, the answer is yes. People always see new images than they saw before in the first time. Why is that? Well, because Dave, you gave us more direction on what to look for. You told us to look for something red. And yes, you now are going to see things that you didn't see before. So we'll give you one more. I know some of you are like, where are all those images? Are they all still there? Yes. So I'm going to leave this on the screen so you can satisfy your curiosity. The second question is, if we had time to go around the horn to see if we could catalog every image that's on this collage, the odds are pretty high that we could, because everybody sees a little bit something different because our filters are constantly at work. Our eyes are drawn to what's important to us. Now, for everyone, compensation is important to you. For some reason or another, right? You have to provide for yourself, right? You need to get profit from the hard work that you do, just like scripture tells us. But how you manage that, I would suggest you're going to be far more profitable if you're paying attention to it along the way. If you are now looking for red things throughout this collage of different job search activities that you're going through, I think you're going to actually get the result of seeing more things that are red / compensation. All right, hopefully that quiz illustrates the point that if you're the more aware of it that you are, and I'm going to try and prompt your thinking, provoke some thinking that may have you think differently about compensation than perhaps you did before, of it only it being in the end of the job transition process. And I always want more, when that may not be the reality of what it is you're facing. So here's a quick quiz. Hopefully you're already taking it while I'm talking, because we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. I'm going to be trying to get through this presentation in record time so we can open it up for questions. If you have questions along the way, I'm not going to take them along the way, but please put them in the chat room. And at the end, Harry will then moderate the questions to me so we can get to as many questions as possible. So I'm showing it's 7:37 Central Time, and we're going to try and end with about 20 minutes for questions. So hang in there. We're going to have a lot to go through, and I'm going to skip through some different slides. What you see here, hopefully you've answered some questions along the way. The unemployment rate is 6.7%. It actually stayed pretty stable from November to December. Our wages rising and falling, the economy producing more or fewer jobs. Boy, those are confusing questions because it depends on which report you look at. One quote that I saw from December 17th of 2020 is that the real average weekly earnings actually went up 4.7% from November of last year to November of 20, November of 19 and November of 20. Now, as you all are well aware, with all of the pandemic ramifications, with unemployment being what it is, because I believe that 6.7% is vastly underestimated, underreported. There are many people who have given up work, that have run off the rolls of the unemployment checks. There are people who would work if they could work, but they've kind of stopped and are not in that flow of being reported by the Department of Labor. So I think that unemployment rate is definitely in the double digits, not at 6.7%. And there's a lot of articles that give varying opinions on that. What professions are in demand? Well, if you're paying attention, right, with COVID, the hospitality industry is not in demand right now. Doesn't mean it won't return, but right now, if you worked at a hotel or a restaurant or the travel industry, you have probably been hit pretty hard, much harder than other industries. Whereas if you're in the construction industry, things are taking off. Why is this important? It's important because if you don't know what you're looking for, you're going to be sure to find it. And if you're not aware of what the environment is that you're hunting in, and what the supply, basic economics, supply and demand is for the type of work that you're doing, you're not going to be advantaged when you come to negotiation. If hospitality workers are a dime a dozen, no disrespect meant to that profession, versus construction workers, versus pastors, versus HR people, versus accountants, whatever it may be, you need to understand that as you get into the eventual offer, negotiation, and acceptance of that offer, right? So fundamentally, are you ready? Are you seeing as much red as you can in the playing field of the environment that you're going through? That's what we're trying to get after today. So to do that, we've got 8 broad topics that we're going to be trying to hit in varying levels of detail. And then we're going to get to questions in about 29 minutes. All right. Again, please keep those questions coming through the chat room. So the first thing I'd like to point out to you is that the very first place to start is you need to understand from a compensation perspective how compensation actually affects your search, and how the targets that you're aiming at may cause you to take different strategies to either settle for different compensation or extend yourself for different compensation. So what does this PowerPoint mean? If you look on the far left, you'll see a target with a bullseye. In this particular case, the companies that this individual was chasing are in the center of the bullseye. That was priority 1. Priority 2, 3, 4 are the rings around there. And you can see that those are labeled based on that individual's skill set. Each individual, you as a job seeker, would need to create your own target. What exactly are the companies or industries that you're chasing primarily? What would you then use, as he calls, a stepping stone? So where are you going to stay focused? Where would you go to a stepping stone? Where might you go to a different level as a stopgap, just to provide some, money on the table? And in this particular case, it was a gentleman who said, number 4, so honey, I'm going to need to go over here versus the target because I need to put food on the table. So there's 4 levels of targets marked by the timing of how much cash do you have, how long can you survive, what's your patience level, what are you seeing as the opportunities for compensation to come in. So your target may be $10 an hour, you may have to settle for $7 an hour, just to use wrong numbers, but I don't want to paint a picture on salary levels. In this particular case, you'll see also a little box on the timeline of what he was having to work through, June through January. And he set, before he got there, he set objective goals on when he would shift gears to change his sights on the target, which inevitably would change his compensation levels. All right, hopefully all that makes sense. But we found that this exercise to go through, no matter where you are in your job seeking capacity right now, is a very useful exercise to get reality on what is the compensation that you may be coming after under which time frame. And we will make this slide available. I'll get Harry a template so that if people want to just use it and fill it in offline, we can definitely do that. Number 2, inevitably we get the question, what are you looking for? What is the salary range? And people say, oh, I don't know. I hate to answer that question. Or I've been told that the first person who gives a number loses in the negotiation, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things may be true. The reality, however, is you got to give them a number. If you don't give them a number, you don't go to the next step. Why? Because recruiters' jobs depend on it. When I was in the HR function at United Health Group, or when I was at Arthur Andersen, inevitably, when I was personally involved in a search, we'd get, the recruiter would bring 3 to 5 people in for people to be interviewed. That recruiter's job depended on those people fitting in the salary requirements that we had budgeted for that position. If we ever had to ask the question, wait a second, this person is way outside the range, how did we even get this person in here? That recruiter would be at risk, right? They have to know who they're bringing in, at what rate, et cetera. So the way they mitigate that risk is they ask the question, what are your expectations? So you need to give them a range. And we're going to come to, I'm going to explain how I would set that range. from a generic overall process, and then you can start to fill in the numbers that apply for you and your industry and your position. But you've got to come up with a range. However, you don't get into a discussion, all right? There's a difference. You have to answer the question, but you don't want to get into a discussion about salary until the very end of the interviewing process, when you have done your dead level best to ensure that they know that you are the best fit for that position. You can do best what they need most. Because if they think that you're the best at what they need most, your position is much more strong to negotiate salary than if you're just, well, maybe you're the right person or maybe not. And again, we're going to talk about strategies to ensure that you get your hooks into them and they likewise get their hooks into you, so you can try to maximize that compensation. Until then, you want to hold off on the inevitable questions, because some very skilled recruiters and HR people will, and hiring manager will start to want to get into more than just the range. So could you settle for this? What do you think this is worth? All of those things you want to avoid until the very end. And you may be able to respond and say, you know, that's really premature. I'll get to that, but I'd like to understand the job better. So United Health Group is a large company. And if you are the controller, financial position, a financial controller of one of our businesses within United Health Group, that compensation level is based on other large companies. It's not based on Jill's salon accountant, right? Those are very different capacities, responsibilities, et cetera. So you need to understand fully the requirements of the job and what's the scope and scale of that job before you get into really talking about fully what that position, that compensation would be. So if your compensation history is erratic, which it may be, and for some folks, COVID-19 is almost the perfect excuse, right, for why some of that compensation may be erratic. It could be that companies were going through all sorts of reorganizations and restructures. If you're on the sales side, it's not the first time that someone's sales incentive comp has been relooked at because it got out of whack, or the owners of the company thought that they shouldn't be paying as much for what you were delivering. There's all sorts of factors. What you want to be able to do is get it as simple and clear as possible so you can keep moving to know more about the job and to continue to sell yourself versus getting into that salary discussion. So when do you discuss compensation? You want to wait until they've seen all these bullet points. So you want to be at the point where they just got to have you. They cannot wait another day. They have determined that what you do best is what they need most. They need you to start Monday. They want you so badly. Now, here's the thing. Most interviews and most interview processes that I've put together, overseen, supervised, observed, don't give you that opportunity. You're going to go through oh, here's the great video screening, right? And then somebody unknown to you is going to watch your video. So you don't even get a chance to start to build a relationship. It's just, here's the video and you're answering the questions. Oh, then you get selected. Now there's a screening interview where there's an actual person talking to you, and then maybe that's a 30-minute. And of course, in today's environment, that's video also. Then you may get into several people talking to you. And if you then are the candidate selected, the offer comes, well, that conversation with the hiring manager particularly is probably just 1 hour long. So are we really in the best position to negotiate compensation with the hiring manager after a 1 hour conversation? You've only got to know them for 1 hour, and you're going to start navigating something that could determine a lot of your life, like how much money, how much profit you get for the hard work that you do. I would suggest that's not enough time. So assuming you are going for a salaried position, an exempt position, they probably don't think they've got to have you until you get them more fully engaged. So then I would simply, at the receipt of the offer, say, boy, I'm excited. That's wonderful. I appreciate the offer. I've got these 20 questions. I'd like to come back in. I'd like to talk again on the Zoom call with somebody, with my hiring manager, about the questions I have about the company, the position, and the compensation package. It just engages them more fully so that you can start laying the groundwork for what the compensation could be. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. We can come back to that in a little bit. So remember, the purpose of the process is that you want to uncover the most that an employer is willing to pay to get you. Obviously, the employer wants to get you at as low a price as possible. I would suggest it probably needs to be reworded to be as fair a price as possible. In my experience, there are very few companies that are actually trying to lowball you, trying to cut you off at the knees from a compensation perspective, because they've all been burned by bringing in someone too low, out of market, and then within 3 months, 6 months, or a year, that generally comes back to bite them. So they're trying to do something that they believe is equitable and fair. On the other side, what you need to understand is there is generally a range for them, just like they've asked you your range. So how do you move from the bottom of the range to the top of the range? And that is, going back to this slide, they've got to have you. So you need to understand what their environment is and how they see you based on your experience. How much do they like you, their level of desperation, their leverage, and the relationship that you're able to build. So a quick story to illustrate the point. Our youngest daughter, Rebecca, just finished physical therapy school. So she was applying for the role of physical therapist here in Southern California, and new college graduate, no work experience. She had some clinical experiences that were through her school, but she had never been paid as a physical therapist. She passed her boards. It's time to get the first physical therapy job. She went through, interviewed with a different firms. Happily, she's landed one, and she's been working now a couple months. But in that discussion of the process of where she was, as she and I were going back and forth about what she could ask, she discovered that the person who's now her boss and her colleagues had taken a 10% pay cut because of COVID-19. So the owner was trying to conserve cash. He took a cut himself, which also told me quite a bit about him as a person and the character of him as a future boss for her. Well, what do you think her position to negotiate a compensation increase would be upon getting that offer? It wasn't there. It would have been really out of character for her to try to navigate a higher compensation level, knowing that everybody else had taken a pay cut. However, there were still points in her conversation that she was to have with her employer, now her boss, to say, when we get out of this COVID-19 and the lack of clients we're seeing, and they're seeing the work pick up every day, then she was able to lay the groundwork that at some point, when they go up, hopefully she goes up. So it's more than just the initial offer that you're able to navigate and you're setting the stage for. You're also looking down the road for how that employer, that hiring manager, views you with regard to pay. Now, you don't want to come across as, this arrogant person who has to get at the top of the heap and I need to be paid, and you certainly don't want to be that high maintenance type of employee. But you certainly want to let the person know that you expect very fair pay for a fair day's work. So we're going to continue to go through that. And that gets into your experience, your likability, what's the level of desperation they have to fill that role. So a very easy question is, how long has the role been open? Again, that's a question that you can ask very easily as part of the interview process. Inevitably, good interviewers will allow you time for questions. Not everyone's a good interviewer. So that's why it would go into your questions that I mentioned earlier as a follow-up process once you've received the offer, to ask some of these questions so you can kind of gauge just what is the status and the state of that company, the hiring manager's worldview, their philosophy on compensation, along with just the mechanics. So here's some homework. that you need to know about yourself. So shifting from the company now to looking at yourself. How much do you really need? What is, how we're going to get to this, why this is important in a little bit later, because it's one of the 5 numbers that you absolutely need to know. Well, to know that number, you've got to do your homework on where you spend money. So what is the basic level of compensation you need to survive in today's environment? And these are just some of the areas that are out there. So you may be in an apartment that is too expensive and you need to move into something smaller. You may be in a renting a home when now it may be actually cheaper to buy on a monthly cash flow basis. I mean, there's all sorts of scenarios from just a housing, and then you get into food, all these other areas. You may have specific things. This again is a very unique exercise because you are distinctive and unique in where you have spent your money and what your lifestyle is, but you will need to know this number. You also need to understand what are the typical salaries for your field. If you are a physical therapist, that's very different than a physical therapist assistant or aide. A controller is different than a bookkeeper. I mean, and the way you do this is you can talk to people. Some of it's fairly easy to get. There are websites that you can go to. I've listed a few here that might be of use. I'm sure there's some out there that I don't have listed, but literally if you go through and start to Google, Indeed is another one I should have on here that you can get some salary information on. You can start to gauge what is the reasonable range for what you're worth, right, in today's market. And again, if you go back up to the quiz that I gave at the start, knowing which way wages are headed, knowing which industries have been hit, in this case by the pandemic, et cetera, all will play into your gauging what the marketplace is for your skills and service. So that leads us to what are the 5 numbers that you need to know, because as it actually gets back to the very start of the presentation. When you have to give a number, I would suggest you build your range from these 5 numbers. So the first number is pretty simple. Although I've talked to people and they don't, when I've interviewed them and they don't know, and i.e. through the recruiter, but what did your W-2 say last year? A classic question is, how much money did you make last year? Okay, that's a very black and white number. Number 2, which we just talked about, what's the bottom line? What's the number they have to hit in order to hit your lifestyle? Now that doesn't mean that it matches the market. Your lifestyle may be over the market in actuality for your position, but at least gives you a gauge of another number. So let's say, for example, that I'm going to be interviewing for an accountant. I'm a former accountant myself, so let's just pick on that particular industry. And let's say I made $60,000. So number 1 is $60,000. I'm going to write these numbers down myself so I don't forget. The bottom line of what I have to hit, I need to hit $50,000. That's my lifestyle, $50,000. If I got this particular number, number 3, if I received an offer of $90,000, I'd fall off the chair and then accept it on the spot. That is my over the top number, right? Because that's a 50% increase over what I was making. That's a great number, 90,000. Okay, what about number 4? I'm comfortable at this number, but I'm not really happy. So I'm probably comfortable at 53,000, but I'm not happy because it's not what I used to make. And I'd like to, of course, make more money. I can certainly cover my living expenses, but if my living expenses are 50,000, 53 is kind of tight. And then the 5th number is I've done my research. I've talked to people. I've picked up things through networking. I've gone online. I've looked around in the websites. And I think the market range that I've experienced for my position is probably 51 to 65. So right now on my little piece of paper, I've got 6 numbers written down. As you look at what your range should be, you may come up with a target of, in this particular exercise, I'd say, I'm going to target my number to be 58,000. So I may need to go down a little bit over what I was making. And then I'm going to go plus and minus 20% to create my range. So 20%, roughly $10,000 to $12,000 down and up. There's the range that I would give way back at the beginning of the conversation on those pesky questions of you have to give them something. I would have given them that range of about $20,000 in total based on my knowledge of these 6 numbers, right? All of you will have different numbers. This isn't a perfect process. There is not a little spreadsheet that shows you the exact number. But the more that you do your homework, the more that you're alert for compensation tips along the way, the more prepared and equipped you're going to be to navigate once you get to that inevitable offer that we've just talked about. So you've given the range, you've gone through the interview, you've received the offer. You're gracious on the offer. Particularly if it's a salary position, an exempt position, I would always encourage you never to just accept the offer immediately. Unless, of course, it's that 90,000 where it's over the top and you're like, okay, wow, I hope they don't change their mind and discover that I'm a fraud. I mean, I want that job, right, at 90,000. But you want to follow up. You want to be enthusiastic. You want to be gracious. You ask them when they need a response. You're going to want as I mentioned before, to get into more, ingratiate yourself with them where they got to have you before you ever start to negotiate the compensation. You want to deepen that relationship, get your hooks into them as much as you can, and vice versa. You want it to be at the point where they love you so much that they just don't even care what you're asking, because what you're asking is going to be reasonable, right? You're not going to ask for 90, right? If you were making 60, you've given them a range. And then if they respond, well, we need to know right now, then I would suggest it may not be the company that you really want to work for. Most companies, and I'll say 98, 99% of the companies understand a person's need to think over a salary offer, talk to their spouse, their significant other, get wise counsel from a friend or whoever they want to talk to, just to kind of work through a process. But you'll need to give them a date by which they will give you a date, or you'll need to give them a date by when you want to get back to them. And then I would go through and consider a couple things. You need to look at total compensation. What are all the factors that you could consider when you're looking at a salary? Normally just a job offer, okay, it's a salary. Well, what about incentive? What about equity? What about these other fringe benefits? And on our website, at the national website, we actually have these areas listed where you can start to see about 30 or 40 different things to consider. Parking, let's just pick on that one. If you are used to working in a suburb and now you are going to someday physically return to work and it's going to be downtown Minneapolis, well, now you got to pay for parking. That has to factor into what it is that you're negotiating. Quick illustration. When I moved from Arthur Andersen, after Arthur Andersen imploded and I was unemployed, and I began interviewing with United Health Group there in Minnetonka. And within that interview, or coming into the interview, I noticed there were cars parking in enclosed, protected spaces in the United Health Group lot. The first thing I asked for after I received my offer and I went through the process was, I really want to be in that enclosed parking space. Coming from LA to Minnetonka, whatever I can do to stay as warm as I possibly could. That was the top of mind for me from a negotiation perspective. It may not be the same for you. You may be used to, particularly after pandemic, having a lot of flexibility with remote work. Well, is there a remote work allowance for you to have the technology, for you to have the bandwidth of your Wi-Fi to process all the things that you need to do in working remotely? I believe more and more companies are going to have to do this coming, if they haven't already, coming out of the pandemic to keep their productivity, et cetera. What will companies do on office space? Will it be required, optional? All of those things are things to talk through. And those are questions you can ask well before you get an offer. These don't have to wait just the end. But again, a lot of possibilities out there, and our website is crossroadscareer.org is our national website, crossroadscareer.org, and you can find out more information. You may wonder about signing bonuses. So let's say that your salary offer is right in your range. It's right in the middle of the range. It's a reasonable offer. You don't think, based on the things that you've picked up so far, that they're really going to be too excited about negotiating base compensation. What about a signing bonus? If they got to have you, from my old role of being at United Health Group in compensation, depending on the level, that was almost a slam dunk. If they asked, we gave. Okay. You won't know till you ask, right? But you want to be thoughtful in what you ask for and how you ask it. Other bullet points, future raises. I find that when I talk to someone and we're going through this discussion about what to negotiate, if at all to negotiate, right? In today's environment, you may not feel comfortable with that. That's fine. Most of them don't know what the raise cycle is. They don't know what the incentives are based on. There are just so many questions that are not answered that are very fair questions, because you're making a life decision to go to work for a company to get that profit that I mentioned from Proverbs 14:23 for all your hard work. It'd be a shame not to understand what that compensation is and what the opportunities are. Many times people are trying to respond even before they've received an offer letter in writing. Now, it's certainly standard to receive a verbal offer before you receive a written offer. But before you accept, I would get the offer in hand via email, look at it, read it, share it with a friend, see if they pick up some ideas, and then ask questions about it. Going back to illustrate, my daughter, she didn't negotiate. She accepted the offer as is. She had received the offer letter. She just finished 60 days this past week with her new boss. And I was giving her some coaching on, hey, let's have a 60-day check-in and let's get some feedback. How are you doing? Is he pleased? Is he happy with your progress as a new physical therapist? Are you advancing and learning at the rate that he thinks you should, et cetera? In addition, she had been told that she doesn't receive healthcare benefits until she receives full-time status. And she was told she was going to be on a part-time scale, as well as a part-time schedule. Well, within 2 weeks of starting, her schedule went to full-time. And yet she didn't know, as she looked at her offer letter, when did full-time begin? And guess what? Full-time triggered benefits and the incentive plan. And there were things in the incentive plan that even after 60 days of work, she didn't know what they meant. Completely normal, all right, given the circumstances of where she was in the salary negotiation, but certainly now would be a good time to start to ask the questions. How does this work? Ideally, you get to know that before you start the process. Are there severance positions? You want to end the process in a graceful note, right? As you bring this to a close, you don't want to be, so how can you pay me more? You want to be able to weave this into how you start to get, how you ask for the consideration. And the way I do it is, after I've gleaned all the information I can, after I've gone as far back as many times as I can to get my hooks into them and their hooks into me, so that I think that they got to have me, that's when I say, look, there are several things on the offer I'm wondering if you would consider. I'm wondering if you would consider increasing the base salary, increasing, paying for parking. What kind of training dollars are available to me? What salary grade will I have? Because that salary grade, which many people don't recognize, is a very important thing about benefits that aren't in the benefits package per se. It's those perks. It could be travel club benefits. It could be, if you're a senior executive, first class travel versus coach travel. It could be all sorts of things. Just ask questions politely to get the answers. And then you'll get a start date, you'll get moving. Here's a couple other things. And then, okay, we're at 10 after. I'll wrap this up really quickly. we'll get to this, we'll get this slide in the next couple of slides so you can see them as well. You need to understand what the health benefits are. The health costs are very different from 10 years ago than what they are today. What is the deductible plan? What's the copay? How does FSA work? What is I mean, we could spend a whole presentation just getting you familiar with what health benefits could or should be for you and your family. You may have a special needs child. You may have ongoing chronic illness that you need specific drugs for. When do those things kick in? How do the copays work? Lots of things that have huge financial ramifications that you need to understand. Same with financial benefits. What type of retirement plans are there? When does the 401k kick in? When do I vest? What percentage do I choose as to, if I put in 2%, does the company give me 2%, or does the company just match 1% for my 2%? All of those things, again, have financial ramifications. I would say on 99% of the people that I coach through a compensation process, after they've received the offer, they don't know the answers to these questions. It's completely normal. All I would suggest is to be earnest about going back to get the answers so that you fully understand what the company has to offer. Many times you'll be pleasantly surprised, but you don't want to be unpleasantly surprised because you didn't ask the questions. And actually, we're just going to skip off of this one and not get into how was your raise, because that is a different conversation altogether. So, Harry, why don't we stop? Only 1 minute over what I said I would stop at, so we can open it up for questions from the group. I'm going to keep sharing in case we need to go back to any particular slide to illustrate or for me to leverage a little more fully, Harry, but why don't I go over to you to see if we have any questions in the chat box that we can try and go after.
Sounds great. We do have a couple, and certainly encourage others to ask questions as well. One is, if the job posting originally listed a salary and you get an offer, is there still room to negotiate, even if it's, I'm guessing, outside of what they listed originally?
Absolutely. Great question. And the answer is absolutely. They posted, I'm going to pay 60,000. But they're posting that without knowing you and knowing what your experiences are and how likable you are and all these other things of how much they got to have you. So now they might be willing to pay 62. So now they may hold and say, that's what we posted. That's what you applied for. And that we're sticking to our guns. That's fine. That's their prerogative. And you have the prerogative to reject that offer. But it never hurts to ask, what's the worst that they can do? The worst they could do is rescind the offer. The odds of that happening are so slim if you are reasonable and approachable in how you ask the question. I mean, we're not suggesting that you play hardball like, some big deal maker on your compensation. You're asking questions. You're reasonable. You're polite. You're simply wanting to understand the offer. And then you're asking if they would consider other things that maybe haven't been brought up, or based on your experience, you think that you're in a stronger position to negotiate. So, Harry, I know you've been through a lot of these offers within your role as an executive recruiter. Anything you'd want to add on that one?
No, I think goes back to what you said early in the presentation. It is largely dependent on how bad do they want you and how bad do they feel they need your background and skills. So the best negotiating you can do is to really have them see the value that you bring to the table during the interview process, and then you're in a much stronger position. But yeah, I learned early in my career as a recruiter that often anything is negotiable. I mean, not always, obviously, but there's no hard and fast rules that are not flexible at times. Another question is, if you're currently underpaid, do you really have to share what you earned? Can't you focus on the value you bring instead?
The answer is yes. You may have been underpaid, and you may have provided or can provide way more value than what is being offered. And that's where the negotiation comes in, right? But inevitably, almost every recruiter is going to want to know, what did you make last year? Because that's at least a starting point for them. And then you may say, well, Last year, I made $40,000, but the previous 4 years, I made $60,000. And last year was 40,000 because of this and this and this, whatever it may have been. You know, maybe big clients were lost, or commission structure changed. And there's also, or maybe you had to take some time off because you had to care for a loved one. All sorts of things happen. Usually there's a logical explanation, or let me rephrase, there needs to be a logical explanation for why you're looking to make significantly more than what you made last year. And whenever people do, if they're being reasonable, there's a reasonable explanation.
I think it's also fair to tell the recruiter or the employer that, you know, regardless of what I made in the past, I'm looking for a range in, you know, 50 to 60,000 or whatever your range is. And, you know, if that doesn't fit, the job isn't right for you, but it's fair to tell them the range that you're targeting and not necessarily have to disclose your previous salary. I think most recruiters would accept that.
Right.
Couple people are asking if you could put up the slide again that had all the websites for exploring salary ranges.
Oh yeah, I can do that, assuming I can find out how to share my screen again.
Screen's up.
Okay. Oop,
There
we
you
go.
go. Another question is, how sticky is it to ask for a guaranteed severance?
When you, so guaranteed severance,
Or severance package, I'm assuming.
yeah, I mean, if there's a severance package or a severance policy, the company would be obligated to keep that policy, just like they're obligated within the equitable approach that they have for employees. If you're at the point where you're negotiating a contract as an executive, then obviously you would want that in the contract. In today's world, it's not unusual to talk about severance because the job market over the last 10 years it's just like it's not unusual for you to have changed jobs multiple times over the last 10 years. Companies are constantly shrinking their payrolls, they're growing, people skills change rapidly as far as their demand, and they go to where they're needed. Or so if I'm understanding the question right, I think it's an absolutely fair thing to bring up, and most employers will definitely understand why you want to understand how severance works.
I think there's more leverage on those for executive level roles than there are for most staff level positions, but you can always ask. Once you've had an offer, anything, no question, is off the table. Another question here, someone says, this is great, thanks Dave. One question, is it appropriate to ask about all of the benefits, costs of medical plans, bonuses, stock, 401k match, et cetera, prior to negotiating the salary, so you can be sure that you're looking at the total package?
Yeah, I think the sequence would be something like this. You receive the offer. You've already gone back for all the questions and just general discussion about the company, the position, and compensation processes, like when are raises given, how do incentives work? I mean, things like that. So now you receive the offer. You've politely and graciously said thank you and enthusiastically, and you need a couple days to think about it. They then send you the written offer letter that basically substantiates what was said orally. Generally, they will send you a benefits package along with that, so you can understand at least more of how the healthcare benefits work. At that point of having received the offer along with the benefits package, perfectly normal to want to get a better understanding, particularly if you have healthcare needs that have specific things that need to be covered, like a chronic illness. If you have, insulin that you need to take, and that was, how all this works, you want to make sure you understand it. So prior to receiving the offer or the benefits package, I wouldn't get into too many questions until you receive that offer. If I captured the question right, I hope that answers the question.
I think so.
I got it?
Yeah, I think you did. Certainly at the point of receiving an offer, you should be getting all the details on benefit costs and everything else. If they haven't, obviously you need to ask them for that. And as she's implying, it doesn't really make sense to negotiate until you know what all those are. And just a comment along with that real quickly is, these days benefit packages can vary dramatically from company to company. And I have seen people get a significant increase in salary and still take home less each month because their benefit costs are so high. So really understand those numbers and how it evens out at the when it comes to payday. Another question is, do you have any suggestions that might be different for negotiating rates when you're working through a recruiting firm or pursuing contract work?
Not a whole, I wouldn't have any different recommendations if you're working through a recruiter. Harry, I'll defer to you in a moment for an answer to that one specifically, since that's what you do. When I've worked through a recruiter, I generally try to have the compensation discussion as much as I can with the actual hiring manager, because that's who I need to look in the eye and make sure that I'm developing the relationship and I feel fairly treated, and he knows that I'm earnest about the job and I'm not just trying to jack my own compensation up, et cetera. But that is dependent. Sometimes the recruiter will be the one that is in charge of brokering all of that information flow at executive level or even at a contingent level. Contract is a whole different deal, because with contract, you've got to build in your own benefits. You've got to build in what your downtime is for your utilization. There are different market rates. Usually that is attributed more to piece work or project work, program work. So it's specific with a deliverable in mind, or it's specific to an hourly rate. So there is negotiation around that. But if you're going through a staffing firm, they may have a very clear view on their model for what an accountant makes, what an HR professional makes, what a comp expert makes, go down the line. So you would go down a different route to research a lot of those numbers from a contractor perspective. But Harry, back to you on the recruiter, if you wouldn't mind chiming in on that one.
No, I agree. I mean, some recruiters are going to be more insert themselves more in the middle of that discussion than others will. But regardless of who you're having the discussion with, I think everything you talked about is equally applicable. I don't have any other questions up here yet. Maybe giving people another minute or two here if anyone has any remaining questions we didn't cover. Dave, I think probably people figured it out from when you were talking, but we didn't mention it at the beginning that you're actually sitting in the San Diego area right now, not here in Minnesota. And so a little bit warmer weather than what we have right now, but really glad that it worked out for you to join us.
Well, it's the beauty of technology, right? I love that we're able to stay connected this way, and I can help in some way.
Yeah, we have a new question. I missed the last step of calculating the salary range. Was it the market reality or the 20% up from your bottom line?
Yeah, so once you have these 5 numbers, or maybe even a range for that last number, you then create your own range by determining a number plus or minus 20%. And so in my illustration, I had made 60, I needed at least 50, I was over the top with 90. Number 4, I could get comfortable, but not happy with 53. And I thought the range for the position from a market perspective, the reality of the market was 51 to 65. Well, then I chose the number 58 plus or minus 20%, and that's my range. So roughly, I'm a little rusty on my accounting skills now, but roughly $11,500, $12,000 either way, either side of 58 would be the range that I would then submit as to what I'd be able to go to. However, important point that I omitted, I should have corrected this. I would not go below 50 because I need 50 for my particular lifestyle. And if I'm not willing to give on that, then perish the thought that I would say 48 is the bottom of my range. because I might get an offer at the bottom of my range, and then you're kind of stuck at that point. You want to be cautious and very thoughtful about what you'd submit as the range, because they are earnest in wanting to try to find a number in your range. But they have all these market studies that tell them what that position is worth. And their position valuation may be 48,000. Well, if they know that you're only willing to go to 50, they have to go through that thought process on whether they would entertain you as a candidate. So you do want to be thoughtful as you go through that plus or minus 20% with regard to number two. What's your bottom line? I had a guy in one of my Crossroads small groups one time, and he got an offer and it was the bottom of the range. And he was like, well, what do I do? I was like, well, you gave him that number. You can try to negotiate, but you need to have some logic as to why you think that number should be higher, because that was the number you gave them. So you want to make sure you're thoughtful about that. Good question. Should have caught that when I gave the range of plus or minus 20%.
I think that's it. I'm going to get Tom back on line here and to wrap us up. And thanks very much, Dave.
You bet.
Didn't hit. Okay, well, thank you, Dave. That was great. I really appreciated that presentation and your perspective. That should help everyone as they look to negotiate and get a fair compensation. Thanks to all our contributors tonight. Mike Ingberg did a great job, and Dave Sparkman, obviously, you did a great job also. Thank you to Harry for his moderating in the back and making sure that he can get those questions out. Great job. Tomorrow you'll receive some information from us with some links, other things about the presentation. Just a quick reminder, those 8-week courses are available, those small groups that Mike talked about, that Dave talked about, and they're really the meat and potatoes. So if you're interested, we have one starting on the 19th and one starting on the 20th. Check us out on the website and get signed up for those. They'll be very useful and helpful to you in your job search or your transition. Remember the networking we have available every Thursday morning with Wes Tang and Wes Roper. It's available again on the website to sign up and take part in that. It's very valuable and can be it's a much different type of networking on Zoom, but it's definitely very productive. So give it a try. And if you need one-on-one help, our website has that available. Our prayer support, for that matter, is also available on there. Our next webinar is featuring Scott Welly, and that'll be Thursday morning, January 21st. That'll be 7:30 to 9:30 in the morning. You can sign up on the website. Join Scott as he helps us elevate our performance, entitled Outperform Their Norm in Your Job Search. I've seen Scott do this presentation multiple times. It's well worth your time. I highly recommend it. That'll be next Thursday, the 21st, and you can find the details and pre-register for the seminars on our website. I hope this was worthwhile to you. I'd like to end in a quick prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing Dave to us tonight and giving his wisdom through his seminar. Thank you for the medium of Zoom and the ability to provide these seminars. Thank you for hopefully helping us end this COVID problem we're dealing with, and keep us all safe in the coming week, and make sure that everyone is able to get to wherever they're going safely through the weekend, through our snow. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you again for coming. Best wishes in your transition and your job search. Good night and good evening.